BBC London 94.9.
This is Vanessa Feltz.
Call 020 722 42000.
Vanessa Feltz.
You may have listened yesterday to Danny Baker's show. He was critical of BBC London bosses after learning that his afternoon show on the network was due to come to an end at Christmas. He claimed that what made it worse was that nobody from BBC management had told him the news in person. This is what he said on the station yesterday.
One show had to go, and that turned out to be us. It's just not generic enough, and whatever the reason is, they were good enough not to actually contact me about the information. And I found out this morning by there's a newspaper blowing down the street, and it got stuck around my foot.
Well, we're joined now by BBC London 94.9's managing editor David Robey. Hello.
Hello, Vanessa.
Why did Danny Baker say repeatedly on the show yesterday that he only heard about the ending of his show in a passing conversation and nobody from management at the BBC had told him?
I don't know why he said that. The fact is that I've been in conversation with his agent since the summer, and I've confirmed that conversation several times over about the fact that we want to change Danny's show from a daily show to a weekly show. And his agent assured me he would have that conversation with him. I think I had a phone call yesterday morning from his agent to say he had finally had that conversation and that Danny was aware, was not particularly happy, but would want to say a few words on air, and that's how it's left.
I mean, lots of people listening to this will find that amazing. They'll think, BBC London, one fairly small office. You probably see Danny Baker several times a week coming in, going out. You've known him now for years. I think he started here in 2001. He was here associated with the station long, long before that too. They will be amazed that you didn't feel that you personally, after years of working with him, should speak to him and tell him.
Yeah, so let me try and explain that. I mean, each presenter that works here and in other parts of the BBC has a different way of operating, their preferences. I always talk to you directly about anything to do with your contract because that's your preference. You don't have an agent. I talk to Robert directly about his contract. Other presenters have agents and they pay them a reasonable percentage of their income to look after their affairs. And most of them say, I'd rather you talk to my agent about contractual matters because they don't want to sort of, muddy the waters by talking about detail. And so there are two different types of arrangement. And in the case of Danny, I've only ever spoken to his agent in 11 years about anything contractual. In fact, most things. That's been his expressed preference and his agent's expressed preference. So we started the process. Of course, at some point, I would have wanted to speak to Danny about it as well. But we had agreed that the first conversation would come from the agent, who would be able to put the context and explain the background, and then we could do a follow-up conversation on the weekly show that I was proposing.
So we could get bogged down in, why was it not told this way? Why was it not told that way? But I suppose the pivotal question really that many people want to know the answer to is why? Why did you decide that you didn't want Danny to broadcast on the station every day, every weekday at least?
Okay, well, I'll deal with, first of all, one of the things that's been bandied around quite a bit, that we did it because we wanted to save money. And I have to say that was not the primary reason. I'll come to where that sits in the overall thinking. First and foremost, I have had it in my mind for some time as I've been looking at our schedule that Danny Baker's programme would be better suited as a weekly show than a daily show. Now, I can explain why that is, but that might take a bit longer, and we'll maybe wait till some of the listeners ask that question.
Okay.
Secondly, as everyone knows, Danny took 3 months off over the summer at quite short notice because I was told his workload had built up to such an extent he couldn't cope with all of that and a daily show. So that kind of further confirmed in my mind that having had 3 months off because he couldn't handle his new workload and a daily show, that actually his programme was probably better suited as a weekly show than a daily show, which had been my thinking for some time. Now, thirdly and finally, and in that order, of course, we have to make 16% savings by the beginning of next year. So this will help towards that in the end in some way, and I haven't thought about how we're going to reorganise the schedule accordingly, but it will make a contribution. But it was not the starting point. The starting point was very definitely a programming editorial process and then about Danny's other work commitments.
So was it primarily because you thought it would suit Danny better to put him on once a week, or was it primarily because you thought it would suit the station better to put him on once a week?
It was both. It was, in the first place, it was my thinking that the programme, its style, its content, its shape and the way it fitted into the rest of the schedule would be better as a weekly programme than a daily programme, as he does on 5 Live. Then came the the break over the summer and the fact that the workload had increased such. Now, I was aware that that could happen again in the future, and so therefore it reaffirmed in my mind that a weekly show would be better than a daily show.
Why did you allow Danny to go on air for 2 hours live on the station and effectively, I mean, this is my phrase, I could have taken a phrase from almost any newspaper this morning, there's a picture of him on the front page of the Times, but why did you allow him effectively to pulverise management, BBC London 94.9, quite a few of the staff who work in this station, and all sorts of other things? I mean, did you not realise, because he'd been tweeting since pretty much early that morning, that he was going to say a whole lot of things that very many people would find upsetting and that would, I suppose, be derogatory to the reputation of the station?
Well, having looked at the tweets earlier on, they were not so terrible. They expressed his unhappiness clearly, but it wasn't such that we thought he might go right off the deep end. And also I'd had a conversation with his agent who assured me that although he was not happy with the decision, that he'd kind of taken this view, and I think the words were, what the Lord gives, the Lord taketh away, and therefore it should have been okay. I think there's also a very delicate balance currently, and it's being rehearsed all over the news at the moment, about the right of people to have their say and where the BBC draws a line in terms of allowing free speech and where they should be censoring or controlling or managing content, and we always will err in favour of the right to have your say. Of course, if we had known in advance quite what was going to be said, then we might have made a different decision, but it was a live programme and we didn't really know what was going to be said until it was being said.
Well, certainly compelling listening anyway. Let's bring in Dave on the line in Bethnal Green. Hello, Dave.
Hello, Vanessa. How are you?
I'm all right, thank you. You're on to David Robey.
Yeah, David, two-part question really, mate. First part is, what road are you taking this station down, right? And if Robert Elms is the intellectual side of Radio London, Danny Baker is the comedic side plus the musical side of the station, which I personally believe we don't get enough music on.
Yeah, okay, well, what road are we taking down? We're taking down the same road we've been going since 2000 and, the year 2000, when we relaunched initially as London Live, which is that we are a speech-led station for London, and it's about talking about the things that matter to Londoners, whether it's the big issues of the day or whether it's what's going on around the capital in terms of the entertainment scene. It's being right at the heart of all of the discussion and debate about what's important to London, and music will take its role in that, and we have a number of specialist music programmes, but primarily we're a talk-based, talk-led station.
But can I just interrupt that? Do you not think, right, that with all the best will in the world, Vanessa's show and Eddie Nestor's show is more or less too similar?
I don't think so personally, but obviously that's one of the things about radio is it's very subjective.
I must say, you're the first person who's ever said that my style of broadcasting is anything like Eddie Nestor's. Not that I don't take it as a huge compliment, of course I do, but you're the first person to say that. I think the idea is that one is responding to the first news in the morning, and the other is the news has had a chance to percolate throughout the day and often to develop and change, and by that time, in drive time, when people are coming back from work, they've got a very different view of a story that they may have heard unfolding for the very first time in the morning, but that's only my view. Is that not why we have a breakfast show, then a mid-morning and then drive time, and that we may do the same subject, but it probably has changed and evolved throughout the day?
No, exactly that, and both of you have very different styles as well, so that listeners can take to one style more than another and decide they like the way that the news is presented. The discussion points are laid out by different presenters, so we do have a number of different programs across the day which deal with the big issues of the day, and that will always be our main principal reason for being here. If you look at the way that the Trust has described what we should be in local radio, it is primarily about news, discussion, debate, and the entertainment life of the area.
Dave, thanks very much. Let's go to Andrew on the line in Hackney. Hi, Andrew.
Hi, Vanessa. Hello, David.
Hello.
I'm a regular Radio London listener. If I had to say what was the most unique show on your station, and what was the one that had the most sort of a special place in our hearts and in the hearts of many Londoners, it would be Danny Baker's show, because it's original, it has an original voice, it has, and he's an original broadcaster. I'm absolutely baffled. I'm baffled about your rather bureaucratic and sort of neutral way of explaining what your decision was. I'm baffled by the kind of mealy-mouthed way in which you describe it as being better for him and better for the show that it should be on once a week, which is basically removing it very largely from the schedule. And I'm just absolutely gobsmacked that you should take such a brilliant show and such a fantastic broadcaster away from your station. You know, quite frankly, if I had, place, I'd see your better position for you in perhaps managing a supermarket or working as an accountant. Perhaps that might be better for you. You could obviously do with a rest because you clearly do not understand radio. You clearly don't listen to Danny Baker's show. And I would think anyone who just took a couple of hours to listen to what he was doing would see that's something that should be treasured and protected. Robert Elms, Danny Baker are the real heart of your radio station. For you to think about removing him in the way you have is just shocking. You really do need to reconsider your position having made that decision.
Well, thank you. I think I'll be a disastrous supermarket manager, but let's just talk about the
You're
radio.
A disastrous radio manager.
Well, thank you. Well, that's your opinion. Thank you. But just to put that in context, I've been in the radio business for 30 years. I've managed this radio station for 13 years. I was the first person to bring Danny Baker back here 11 years ago, put him onto a Saturday morning program. We then put him onto the breakfast program, and then he took another 3-month break and returned to the afternoon program. And during that time, as you well know, he's won many, many awards. So I don't think there's anybody who knows better Danny Baker's talent or his contribution. And there's nothing bureaucratic in my decision making. Actually, most of it is about what most program makers do, is that they go on their intuition, also informed by listeners' reaction and also informed by the listening figures. So it's not a bureaucratic process at all. It's quite the opposite of that. It's actually a creative process, and you may say, and I hear you're saying, that this is actually anti-creative, but it's still a creative process that we make in all our decision-making across all of radio and television scheduling.
Andrew, thank you. Let's go to Brian in Lancashire. Brian's in Lancashire. This is pretty much the point of the call. Hello, Brian.
Hi there, yeah. Hi, David.
Hello.
Just more or less echoing what the previous people have said, except perhaps not quite so insultingly, but people listen to Danny Baker on your show, on your London show, from all over the country and all over the world. It's just a shame that you couldn't fit him in a little bit better. Most local radio stations I find quite unlistenable, including my own radio, the sort of Lancashire sort of radio stations, but I specifically listen into Radio London. I know Radio London's not meant to be for me up here, in the north, but
we're very happy to have you, though, Brian.
Absolutely. And it's just such a shame that you couldn't come to some sort of arrangement where you could keep him on, even if it was only for 3 or 4 days a week or something like that.
Well, as I said earlier on, we definitely wanted to keep him on the station. In fact, I was in quite advanced conversations with his agent about him doing a weekly show, just as he does on 5 Live. So that would mean from the BBC there are 2 Danny Baker shows, quite different in content and texture, available. And because of Listen Again, of course, you can listen to it any time in the week as well. So the question was not about whether or not Danny Baker was talented enough, good enough, and I wanted him on the station, but it was about how much. And how we would fit that into the schedule.
Danny's tweet says, in fairness, nobody has talked to me about a once-a-week show. That's what he says. Is that because his agent hasn't talked to him about a once-a-week show, although you've been talking to his agent?
I can't say what his agent has said to Danny, because I don't know. I'm not party to that, but I've definitely been in extensive conversation with his agent about a weekly show, yes.
Let's go to Peter, who's in Enfield, and Peter's got all sorts of questions for you. Hello, Peter. Is he there? Peter in Enfield on the line? Okay, well, I'll tell you what he was going to say. He was going to say, is this final? Is there no way that there can be renegotiations on this one?
Well, it isn't absolutely final. I don't know. I can honestly say at this moment in time, I don't know what Danny's intentions are or what's going through his mind, or whether or not, and nor does his agent actually, as to whether or not he would want to come back. He seemed to make it fairly clear in yesterday's programme that was his last programme, but there were 1 or 2 small caveats, I think, listening in detail. I would hope he does come back. to do the weekly show that we've discussed. I would love to have that program in our schedule from January. Between now and then, I think the next few days will make it clearer, but I have no idea what Danny's intentions are.
Let me read you some of the emails. We've had lots have been coming in all morning. This is from Andrew and Stepney. He says, I was really shocked Danny's leaving BBC London. He is the best show. He says, Vanessa, you're second. Thanks a bunch. He says on BBC London, why not promote it or make more of it? His unique, clever, funny club-like atmosphere and take on broadcasting is something to be held as a benchmark, not given over to bland corporate cheap radio. Why not cut back on all the stale, rather safe programmes? Why not put all the sport on a new radio channel and have shows like Joanne Good and her London show business format in a new great evening show promoting our great West End? Why not extend Danny's show and his colleagues to an evening show of humour and song instead of corporate football? There are lots of changes coming anyway, aren't there?
I'd need a lot of power to do all of that.
Gosh.
I'd need to be director of radio or higher. I mean, at the end of the day, I can only look after the best interests of the BBC London listeners, and that does mean primarily I have to think about London listeners. I'm aware that Danny has a UK-wide and international following, but primarily my brief is to look after London, and I have to make the best decisions for the station on that basis. Now, they won't always be the most popular decisions. We've had to make other decisions in the past that have been unpopular. That said, the station's popularity in terms of numbers of listeners has grown over the past 10 or 11 years substantially, almost doubled. And so I'm not claiming that therefore is the only sign of success, because, as you know, our presenters on this station are well decorated with awards, not least yourself and Eddie Nestor, as mentioned earlier on. So quality comes first. Quantity is, in terms of numbers of listeners, is important. And I hope we've delivered on both, and I would have hoped to continue to deliver that with Danny.
Let's bring Jackie in Essex in. Hello, Jackie.
Hi, Vanessa. Hi. We were just absolutely, we were driving and we were so upset. We had to pull over into a supermarket car park to listen to the last half an hour of the show. We just couldn't believe what we were hearing. You know, this show's been part of our daily life and a little ray of sunshine in these depressing times that we seem to be in at the moment. We just couldn't believe that you could do something like that to an award-winning, DJ who just does such a fantastic show. He talked about something recently and said something about generic. He mentioned yesterday, or maybe my show's not generic, and I want to ask you that question. Is it because he doesn't kind of fit some kind of generic stereotypical mould? I mean, we love him because he's zany and different. I mean, what are you going to do? Are you going to bring him back? What's going to happen? And if it's a question of cost cutting, well, surely somebody's got to take his place.
Yeah, okay. So on the point about generic, I don't think any of our programs across the day are generic. I don't think we do generic radio. We're the only radio station on the dial that actually offers non-formulaic music, for instance, in Robert's show and Danny's show and others. We're the only one that offers a broad range of personality-led programs, none of which I think could fairly be described as generic, certainly not Vanessa here, nor Robert Elms, who follows. So generic is not something that drives us. In fact, quite the opposite. We've tried very hard to be as unique as we can within our remit. That said, you ask about Danny. Well, Danny is an exceptional talent. He's a brilliant broadcaster, and that's why I wanted to keep him on the station, but on a weekly basis rather than a daily basis, for all the reasons I explained earlier.
Does that satisfy you, Jackie? Obviously not.
No, we're deeply upset about it, but you think, it seems to be everybody that's rung up, nobody has rung up and said, oh, great, it's about time for a change. It's because right across, we loved your station because it's not generic. You get a mix of music and different views and shows and everything that you just don't get anywhere else. And I feel that doing this is beginning to chip away at that. They did it to another... do you remember GLR years ago? We used to listen to that.
You used to work on it, of course I remember it.
Yeah, of course you did. And then that changed and it became very kind of talky, and you think, the way you've got it now, it's just a brilliant mix of your show, Robert's show, Eddie's show and Danny's. It's great, and I feel like, as much as I love you, Vanessa, and I love Robert's show and Eddie's, I feel like you're beginning to cut the guts out. Not you personally, but the guts are beginning to be cut out out of it, and we're just desperately sad about it.
Let me read a few of the emails that have come in. This is from Anita in Brockley. She says, I can't afford to call, I'm afraid, but please read this out. I hope Dan is listening, along with particularly your show and Robert's. Danny Baker's show was one of the best shows on any radio station. He brought warmth, humour, intelligence and knowledge in abundance. Why cut one of the best shows on radio? Hillary says, I can't describe how upset I am at the news that Danny's show will be cut from the schedules. This capital city can be a hard, depressing place to live. This is often compounded by downbeat phone-ins and news programmes. It's sometimes difficult to pick up after all this, especially recently with all the Jimmy Savile debacle and the relentless phone-ins about paedophilia. While necessary to discuss, it can lead to an overexposure of the subject and make us feel as if the whole capital is full of nasty, hateful people. I think you know where she's going with this. She says Danny Baker is a reversal of this. He's an uplift to the capital, an injection of positivity, a reason to laugh, a balance to the day. He reminds us all that despite the grimness of everyday life, Londoners are funny and can look at the positivity and quirkiness of life. It says, listening to David Robey, though, it seems all complaints will be falling on deaf ears. What a shame. Please listen to the listeners' views.
Well, I am listening, I promise, and I'm reading lots of emails, and everything goes in, as it has done all the way through my life and my career in running radio programs. I mean, the station is as it is now because, I and the number of people that work with me have a vision about what we'd like it to be. We can't make the right decision every time. Of course, subjectively, sometimes things do impact some listeners more than others. These are kind of quite the opposite of what was being said earlier on, bureaucratic. These are quite sort of creative decisions which can, as I say, favour some people and not others. If we take just going to give a little example, that's all, which was about how much. It wasn't about whether we have Danny Baker or not, but how much. It's about the scheduler on BBC, on ITV, deciding when and if the Downton series should end. Of course, there will be viewers who want it to go on forever, and some might want it to finish right now. But in the end, a decision has to be made. What is the right amount of anything?
Would it be fair to say, some people have said that Danny Baker is, I know it's a horrible cliche, I try not to use those very often, but a Marmite kind of broadcaster, so that for all the calls we're getting today from people saying we absolutely adore him, there's no one like him, we can't miss him, he infuses our day with joy and fun. There are lots of other people who just don't get him. They don't think he's funny, they don't like it, they don't listen. Is that fair or not? I mean, you're the person who reads the ratings and knows how people respond. Is that fair or unfair?
I think that is fair, but then again, I think virtually all our presenters are Marmite, and that's why they've been selected, because brilliant personality presenters do divide opinion, and if you have a presenter that doesn't divide opinion, they're probably not that great a personality. So that's a kind of funny way round of explaining it. But yes, absolutely, I think the Marmite quality, as long as you get you get more people love than dislike, that's the balance you're going to get for a successful formula. So I think Danny fitted that very much.
David's in Palmer's Green. Hiya, David.
Hi, good morning.
Morning.
Good morning, David.
Morning.
Hi. You touched on the Marmite issue, and I quite agree with that. There's moments of absolute genius there. But moving forwards, with Danny, I don't know if he's due in this afternoon, but where do we move forward to? What have you got lined up for today, and what were you planning to line up past January?
Well, we've obviously had to organise a fairly rapid stand-in for Danny today, and as I'm talking to you now, we're still trying to confirm who that is, hopefully Gary Crowley. But Danny has, and I have to be careful about how I say these things now. Danny's agent is of the view that it'd be a good idea to have a day off at least to think about things, and so we've agreed on that. So we're covering his show today. As of what happens on Monday, I don't know. As I said earlier on, we still have to find out what Danny and his agent's thinking is over the weekend, and I'll be open to any discussion about that. And beyond that, in January, I would like to have had Danny on a weekend programme, and we would be looking at a new schedule across the day, which might have somebody covering the current Danny Baker slot, or it might mean a change of times in the way our programs run across the day, and it may be an alteration. That all sounds a bit vague. I'm sort of fairly advanced in my thinking on it, but until we actually get to the sort of final schedule, I can't talk about it. But the Danny decision now is really what we have to look at, what's going to happen in the next couple of months.
This is from Jim in Catford. I actually agree with David Robey. I have an events business, and if somebody had lots of time off and then gave me short notice to take a further 3 months to work somewhere else and then inform me this might happen again, I would definitely end their employment with me. I love Danny, but like many celebs, he might be thinking he's irreplaceable. He's not. None of us are. He can't have it always. But Jason in Herne Hill and very many other people say, who are you going to replace Danny with? I work outside all day. Vanessa, Robert and Danny keep me company all day. I don't listen again. Keep me company during the day with good banter, good music and interesting conversation. And other people, please ask him, says Henry, who are you going to replace him with?
Can I just go back to the first point very quickly?
Yes.
Because it's absolutely not the case that we decided to terminate Danny's contract because he took the summer off. I explained earlier that was one of a number of factors why I thought a weekly programme was better than a daily programme, and that's what I still hope we'll get. To the other emailers, I think, I will do my best to find the best talent to match this station's incredibly talented lineup, and that's what we've always tried to do. The decision over Danny has been a difficult one, really difficult. The reaction has obviously been as difficult, if not more difficult. I take on board what everybody's saying. I don't think this is going to change our plans for January, but what I hope is that Danny will still be on the station in January and that we will have a new lineup which you'll be equally excited about.
Thanks very much indeed. That's David Robey, the managing editor of BBC London 94.9. Thanks to everybody who joined in the programme this morning. Thanks to Kate producing today, Jamie and Gaprit on the phones, Ola driving the desk. Robert is coming up with what I'm assured is a magnificent show, the sort he always does on a Friday. You'll have a chance to chill out and enjoy it with him. And I wish you a fabulous weekend. I'll see you on Monday. Lots of love. Bye-bye.